Today, Jared Kushner met virtually with the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Chairman Benny Thompson told reporters that the committee has no evidence that Trump's son-in-law was involved in the planning of the events of January 6th and has not sought to obtain his email or phone records, but that he's of interest because of the role he played as a senior advisor in the administration. Princess Ivanka, Daddy's favorite enabler, did attend the rally at the Ellipse and famously called the violent insurrectionists patriots. She later deleted that tweet. According to reports, the prince and princess of nepotism hosted a fancy dinner for administration officials at their house nearly 24 hours after their daddy's supporters tried to tear down American democracy. Since Trump's failed re-election bid, the two have bent over backwards to try to rehabilitate their reputations. It should be noted that while the right is having a collective freakout about what a private citizen, Hunter Biden, did when his father was no longer vice president, Jared and Ivanka made $640 million while they were working at the White House. Meanwhile, according to Democratic Congressman Pete Aguilar, a member of the January 6th committee, the panel is working to fill the nearly 8-hour gap in the White House phone logs. Chairman Thompson confirmed to reporters that the panel is considering issuing a subpoena for Trump's personal phone records. The House Rules Committee will meet Monday to decide if they will recommend that the House find Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino in contempt of Congress for their refusal to comply with subpoenas. Joining me now, former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner and Congressman Eric Swalwell of California, a former impeachment manager and a member of the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees. Thank you both for being here. Congressman, I'm going to start with you. It is heartening to hear that the committee is at least considering going after Donald Trump's phone records, because I think that 7.5-hour gap, not since Nixon has there been a greater scandal. And this is far greater than the 18-minute gap. Do you believe that the committee and that your fellow Democrats and 2 Republicans will have the gumption to go ahead and issue that subpoena?
I hope so, because this guy operates like a mob boss, and he knows what to say, what not to say, and on what type of forums to say it. We learned that from Michael Cohen. We learned that from so many others, that he doesn't write emails. He doesn't send text messages. He'll never directly tell you what to do. He'll just, kind of wink and nod so that he knows how to work around it. And so that 7-hour gap is so glaring. So either something was deleted or he intentionally moved off to use his own personal cell phone to make calls. And so, yes, I hope they explore it, because I bet you there's a trove of information there.
And I'm assuming, Glenn, you as a prosecutor would that's something you would need, right? I mean, if you're trying to piece together what the former president was doing on January 6th, and there's 7.5-hour gap, you need that. To subpoena those phone records, how difficult is that to do? How much time does it take? And would they need to involve the Justice Department?
Yeah, you do need it. You want it. You want a complete record, Joy. But frankly, the absence of that 7 or 8 hours of phone calls is as important and perhaps even more incriminating than the phone calls themselves. Now, that remains to be seen, because we have to first subpoena the call detail records. We have to figure out what phones Donald Trump was using. Frankly, I think when you look at the testimony of somebody like Jared Kushner or his daughter Ivanka, they might have some information about whether their father actually knew what the term burner phone meant. So, I think there's a lot to be unraveled here. But frankly, we've all heard, if the crime don't get you, the cover-up will. And I think this 7 or 8 hour gap is going to do so much more harm to Donald Trump and his associates than if they had just produced the calls in the first place.
Well,
Joy, can I just
please.
add that time is not on our side, because as Glenn knows, these cell phone record companies, they don't keep the cell phone records forever. Many of them, it's 9, 12, maybe 18 months. And so we have to move now, because they could be destroyed just in the ordinary course of business.
And we also know that, Donald Trump flushed, paper records down the toilet and ate them. So, we know that he was not one that actually keeps records. We also know, Glenn, that he did know what a burner phone is. Per his former national security advisor, John Bolton, there was a previous lawsuit in which he actually, used the term burner phone, at least on his side. So he does know what a burner phone is. So some of that is silly. Let's talk. You mentioned Jared Kushner. What might he be able to produce, given that he was not there on January 6th physically? What might they want to pull from him?
Well, he undoubtedly had conversations with his father-in-law, and the good news is there is no father-in-law, son-in-law privilege, just like there is no daddy-daughter privilege. So when and if Ivanka is compelled to testify or chooses to testify voluntarily, there will be no applicable privileges other than the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in the event either Ivanka or Jared's truthful testimony would incriminate them, make it seem like they committed a crime. But he undoubtedly had conversations with his father-in-law before, during, and after the insurrection, even if he wasn't present on January 6th. And, you know, sometimes we play the telephone game when we're prosecuting, when we're investigating crimes. I want to know what Ivanka told Jared about her interactions with her father, because all of that tends to build a record. And then we can get the overall picture, you know, before we go to the ultimate target and confront them with all of the evidence that we've obtained.
Yeah, and to come to you for a second, Congressman, you know, this news that that was in the Washington Post, CNN has done some reporting on it too, that the Justice Department actually is expanding its probe a little bit to get closer and closer to the central players. You know, I know some of your fellow Democrats have been very critical. Congresswoman Luria and others have said, "Do your job, DOJ." Do you feel better about what you're hearing?
I do. And these investigations take time. White-collar investigations are usually 3 to 4 years on average, but you see that both the committee, the January 6th committee, they are starting to move up the chain. You know, Jared Kushner is the highest ranking official that's been brought in so far. And it also looks like if they're expanding the number of prosecutors on the criminal side and also asking grand jury witnesses about people, you know, higher up, that they are, you know, expanding what they're looking at. Look, most of this was committed in plain sight. But it does look like they want to have some other evidence, you know, to supplement what the president's already said.
2 more quick questions for you. I'm going to stay with you for a second, Congressman. There was this pretty blockbuster ruling by a federal judge about this Florida restrictive voting law, in which he talked about our democracy being under siege and the right to vote being under siege. Are Democrats concerned that if something like this gets appealed, it winds up in the Supreme Court, where those 6 justices can just now rule, because this is involving Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, that it winds up killing the Voting Rights Act altogether?
That's right. And I would feel much more comfortable if it was in a 50-50 Senate, where Senators Sinema and Manchin would both vote to reform the filibuster and then vote to put back in place the Voting Rights Act. Because this is just, you know, the dashboard is flashing all over the country with different states where you're seeing voting rights abuses. But these judges at the district court level, they can't do much if the Supreme Court is just going to overturn it.
Let me let the two of you, you guys are kind of a buddy act. I don't know if people realize that you guys are kind of a buddy act. There's a law, I believe, that is now on the books because of you, Glenn. Do you want to describe this law and tell us what Glenn Kirshner had to do with it?
I'll give all credit to Glenn, because as a federal prosecutor who's worked on a lot of homicide cases in the district, in D.C., he told me about the angst that so many families have because of the number of cold cases, 3,000 in D.C. And so he pitched to me the idea of having a homicide victims bill of rights that would allow a family after 3 years to have their cold case reopened. It passed with over 400 Democratic and Republican votes in the House this week. It's headed to the Senate, and we hope that families will get some measure of closure pretty soon.
Have you heard from any senators, and do you think that this has got a chance of becoming law, Glenn, as you inspired it?
Yeah, well, listen, I give all of the thanks to Representative Swalwell for hearing me out on this. You know, I have all kinds of schemes and ideas, but he was willing to take it up because of his commitment to addressing violent crime. And Joy, we have more than 250,000 open, unsolved homicide cases in our nation. And that is horrific. These families sit by a phone hoping that a call will come from a detective saying, we have a break in your loved one's case, and those calls never come. And most of them are a product of gun violence. And Representative Swalwell took the ball, he ran with it, and there is now some hope that will come to these families who, you know, wait for closure in their loved one's homicide case. So I couldn't be more thrilled that this is going to become the law of the land.
I never get to report. I almost never get to do good news on this show, so I had to get that in. And the audience can decide who plays the two of you in the buddy picture. Hollywood, get on it. Glenn Kirshner, Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you both very much. Appreciate you both. Still.